So, welcome to Change My Relationship podcast. I have with me again Wendy, who in our first podcast together, she talked about her spiritually abusive marriage to a probably covert narcissist. And at the end of that podcast, she talked about the fact that she's finally left, and that was the last time that she left, and that she really felt like she had to stay away from him and away from his influence in order to maintain and hold on to her truth about how this marriage was not good for her because he still had so much ability to manipulate and get her to doubt herself and get her spinning where she would think it was her fault and she was feeling kind of crazy. So we're going to pick up there. So tell us, you separated from him, you
Mhm.
moved out.
Yeah, which was really, really important. And he was obviously very against that, thinking that, okay, God would never sanction that to God-fearing people, sanction that kind of a separation or divorce. And he just hung on with everything he could, threw everything at me scripturally, that I had been deceived. I just can't forgive, all
Mhm.
those kind of things, trying to make me feel I don't know. It does. It like, am I forgiving? What am I doing? I really want to, take accountability for my part in it. But actually being away from him and his influence was so important for me to see truth as it really is.
Yeah.
Okay. And feeling like you go through so much emotion and you're grieving your identity, even when you start realizing you're going to that it really is over,
Yeah.
that you're going to divorce. And then the backlash, if you're well known in the community, and in
What
the
kind of
church,
backlash did you get from your church? Did you
you know,
get a, like legalistic kind of you're wrong, you're in sin, you can't leave, you don't have
no,
show grounds for divorce? You
it
didn't?
was surprising. It was surprising that
Wow.
it was very different that people were very kind and really loving
Wow.
and caring. I was so fortunate, so blessed.
Hmm.
And I don't know, they just were very kind,
In
welcoming.
your church, in the same church that you had been in where you had been a couple,
It was
did
a different congregation. I left to I lived in a different city.
okay.
So, but then I did have to, just even disclosing that saying the D word was so hard for me.
Hmm.
Divorce. I
Yeah.
just couldn't even say it. To me, this is what it felt like because I came from such a happy place,
Hmm.
and I really wanted the whole time I'm obsessed with trying to have my parents' marriage,
Yep.
you know. Um, it felt so fracturing to me. Like
Hmm.
it fractured everything inside me. It's like I had no solid ground anymore. Like, who am I? And because I wanted it so badly. And I had been trying, it was like my life's work.
Well, it was because you
That
married
family
him like
together.
me. You married him when you were 20.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so this was like literally we grew up in our marriages and became
Mm-hmm.
women in our marriages. And that was who we were, was a wife and a mom.
Yep.
Even though we had, careers on the side, we were still wives and mothers.
Yeah.
So and it is for anyone. It really does shake you up completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're going through so many emotions. So hopefully your listeners understand that that's really clear that you really are. It is a tumultuous time
Hmm.
that you're grieving the loss of your identity and the loss of a together family who
Yes.
you were. How do I define myself now? I have to reinvent myself. And here
Yeah.
I have what's called a gray divorce. They're becoming more common. A silver divorce, a gray divorce. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Explain to what you mean
There,
by those.
there are articles that are coming out now describing that silver or gray divorce is on the rise. And that's just women who are seniors. I'm
Mhm.
63 now. That's hard to pick up and move and really reinvent yourself. And hard to see that there's light on the other side.
Yeah.
It's to even know that that's possible. I know
Yep.
many women in my situation who they just try to grin and bear it.
Hmm.
It's not benign.
Right.
It's really abusive and there is no room for you, it's really toxic to you.
It is.
And for survival,
Yeah.
and this is what another piece of it, being a Christian and really taking it seriously. Um, the guilt of that, really understanding it's okay, divorce is okay.
Yeah,
That God does not sanction abuse. That's
right.
why divorce is okay.
Exactly.
That that's not in harmony with God's laws. Now, I cognitively, logically, I could understand that. But it took so long to have loving, caring friends and clergy
Hmm.
telling me that, hey, listen, that really would be against God's laws
Yeah.
to hold you hostage and say that you have to be in an abusive relationship.
And you were fortunate because imagine if you were, as many women are, and some men, in a situation where you had clergy and other church members telling you you can't leave because of abuse, and yet you know from your own experience, I have to leave, I'm going to die
Mhm.
emotionally, spiritually, physically, relationally, mentally, like I'm already like losing it. I cannot stay. And yet you have them condemning you and telling you are wrong. And then you have to, which is like that spiritual bypassing and spiritual abuse, discounting you like he did, then you have to stand strong against them with
Mhm.
your truth and go against them. Imagine how hard that is. And
Yeah.
women do
Now,
it.
I did have a couple early on. I did have a couple who were saying, wow, you're really lucky. You're lucky, count your blessings that you're with this guy.
Yeah,
Um, and when I remember I explained it and they were like, nah, they're just,
got it.
I thought, wow, I'm going to have to do this against like the advice of even my elders. And like, wow, what am I going to, this is going to be rough. And then you start to second question yourself. But
Mhm,
really, if you do have a deep connection, with God, or if you call
mhm.
it your higher power, if you have that deep connection and you really try to cultivate that. Did have a moment of sweet prayer, just saying, hey, I know this time in life, our earthly life, is a time of growing.
Yeah,
And it's not just about me, it's really about my growth, and I'm willing to grow. And so, is it okay? I mean, when do I matter? Do I get to matter?
yeah.
And immediately, what flooded my heart was, oh, you matter now. I'm a God of abundance.
Oh,
There's more. There is
oh,
life out there. And I felt that, I mean, I don't know if your listeners are all Christian, but this is an experience that's hard to articulate with words.
yes,
Have you ever been flooded with just, you feel like it's the pure love of Christ?
yes.
And it's an unusual thing to happen when you're just devastated.
Yeah. But God does often show up at that place
Oh,
when
and
you
it's
come
like
to
I
him.
felt joy, I felt light, and it didn't last forever.
Right.
But I just knew it was like, okay, that's my moment to know that this is how God handles abuse. You don't have to do that. I don't sanction this.
No, he does not.
Not okay.
Absolutely
If someone
not.
doesn't choose
Yeah.
this, that's so I knew, and it's hard to realize like surely they're going to choose it. Surely they're going to choose health, but sometimes they don't know how.
No, exactly. And that's
And
the problem. For your husband to change, for God to change your husband, would have to have gotten into his brain, taken out all his memories, all the developmental stuff that should have happened, and literally change who he was. And God doesn't do that. He doesn't go in and literally change our personalities and our upbringing and I mean everything about that and make you into a new person. So you have to do the work yourself,
you
but
really have to do the work.
you do.
And at
And
one time when he was getting mad at me for leaving him, the first time, during the first of the 5-year period, that first
mhm,
little separation, he was really upset with me for doing that. And I told him, I just said, hey, we've had all this time together. Marriage is sacred. Relationships actually are really fragile and sacred. They're
mhm,
beautiful. They can just be wonderful, but they take such care and growth. And you squandered all those years God gave you in a marriage
yep,
on becoming a better teacher, on looking good, focusing on hustling for your worthiness
outside.
rather than, yeah, what looks outside, to others, what's worthy. What do good people do? Because he didn't see it in his home. So you pick somebody, what behaviors are they showing?
Yeah,
Check. I'm going to check all those boxes. But behind the scene, you're not really actually, you're not living those principles.
yeah,
So you don't ever become something. So now he's left at the end of his marriage with no tools.
right,
What tools to actually, he hasn't arrived.
right.
I thought, wow, 40 years, I've been working my tail off, really spiritually working, reading, pondering, praying, and trying to change and to become something. I thought, God doesn't just poof, give that to you.
Mm-mm.
You actually really do have to become something. And that's a lifetime of work.
Yeah.
And you can't just get it.
And
No,
you have to want it first.
you
First, you
have,
have to want it. You have
yeah.
to recognize, I
Mhm.
don't have it and I want it. And that's where the work starts. And if that recognition isn't there, then it doesn't happen. So you moved to a
Mhm.
different city, you went to a new church,
Mhm.
and
I-
when did you decide to file? And how did that go?
Yeah. Okay. So it was so hard. It was just took everything I had. And
Mm,
really it was my kids, they asked, they go, do we need to help you? And, do we need to help you just write the papers and just really do it? And then I just knew, I thought, is this the right thing or is it not the right thing?
mhm.
And I thought it is the right thing. Is God going to help me or is he not going to help me? And I thought, well, the answer, if I'm truthful, yeah, he's going to help me.
Yeah.
And I was, I really, part of my self-care was really that grounding.
Hmm.
I really had to go back because you really do lose yourself and think, am I crazy? Can I do this? Or I'm too depressed to even get divorced. It's so much work, Can't
Too
even do it.
depressed to divorce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Why can't I do it? But then, I don't know. This is where I just believe I give credit to my faith that if you really do connect, and I just had to go back to, I mean, the very basics, like and say in prayer, like, who am I really? Am I a child of God? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I am. I'm a child of God. And what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Where am I going? Does life have meaning, purpose, and direction? Is there meaning in our suffering? Is there sanctifying? Is there something I can learn? And will the Lord be with me on my way? And to be honest, I had to say yes to all those things.
Yeah.
But then in those moments, I would receive like superhuman strength and be able to have clarity for a moment and be able to move forward. And then once I hired an attorney, then I was able to do it. And even then, like I'm so worried about him and wanting
Yeah.
to be, the poster child of divorce and like integrating, thinking we don't have to change that much. We can do family things together. We've just uncoupled, but
Mhm.
everything would kind of be the same. And I felt responsible for his social life because I thought, most of our couple friends were with me on my side, you know. And so I felt so responsible for that still. It
Yeah.
was so interesting. And a lot of my tears were for him, and his tears were for him. And
His tears were
all,
for him and your tears for him.
yes, yes. So, you know, anyway, so I really, in the end, Carla, I have to give a plug to your um, Truth in the Mirror, your classes, because see, at that time,
Hmm.
while I'm in the divorce process, I'm taking your
Yeah.
class,
Yeah.
and I didn't even know how to set a boundary. I didn't know if that was allowed. I hadn't even heard of the word, throughout my marriage. But then when I started learning about them, I felt like I was learning
Yeah.
the dark arts of God, because
Yeah.
he's very boundaried, and
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought
Yeah.
if you're a husband, man, you just have to give, 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 and forgive,
And
forgive,
yet
forgive.
you did set a boundary by leaving and
Yeah.
by recognizing that you could get a divorce. But the idea of setting boundaries about a lot of things and using that word and knowing that it was okay
Yeah.
was
And knowing that it
probably,
was okay. I
yeah.
really had to go through that process
Yeah.
and really fact check the story I was telling myself.
Hmm.
Okay. So that helped me so much. And hopefully it'll help your listeners that when you find yourself spinning in those dark places,
Yeah.
I think please do not be afraid to get help. Please speak up.
Yes.
That shame you feel, what shame needs to grow and fester
Hmm.
is silence and secrecy.
Yes.
It's
Exactly.
like putting Miracle Grow on it. But once you come and you have to realize what focus or give yourself credit for the focus. Your goal and your focus is greater health, greater life and loving. Um, the reason you're speaking is to so there can be a better path for both parties because the truth is this is not working
Right.
and
Right.
staying in it and faking it isn't really helping anyone.
Yeah.
You're just lying.
Absolutely.
I love this person. No. Do I trust this person? No. And it's killing me. Yes. And thinking you're doing a Christ-like thing, it's no longer looks like a Christ-like thing
No,
because it's not.
no,
So you're
no.
fooling yourself.
Yeah, you're not loving yourself. I
Yeah.
like Romans 13:10 says love does no harm to its neighbor. And I talk about, okay, well, Jesus said that you're to love yourself as your neighbor. So if love does no harm to your neighbor, then that means that love should do no harm to the other person, to yourself, or to the relationship. And if your love is hurting you, then that's not okay love. You've got to
Yeah.
figure out how to love without hurting yourself. And are you hurting him by getting a divorce? That is the consequence of his choice. So
Mhm.
at that point, when a person has a consequence, you you it isn't it's actually more loving to give them the consequence than it is to not give them the consequence. And I suppose if the idea of actually being divorced, I have one book on my shelf that says it's called Redemptive Divorce. And it's basically the idea is that God can use divorce as the actual boundary of if X, Y, and Z do not change, that divorce is the natural consequence of X, Y, and Z not changing. So if somebody's has a spouse who says, I'm going to divorce, that can be a wake up call, the ultimate wake up call that, oh, now I really need to hunker down and do this. If at that point he was to just dive into therapy and really had changed himself, I don't know necessarily, but I mean, people they have choices.
Mhm.
So you at that point you can only be concerned about yourself because like we said, we got to save yourself first or nobody
Yeah.
gets saved, right?
That was a
Everybody goes down.
concept that was so hard for me
Yeah,
to understand.
yeah,
Because I could maybe logically see it, but oh, your emotions are so raw.
yes,
So it goes so deep, and it's not something that you want. And
no.
you're just hoping, surely we can work this out. Surely it's going to be blessed. I can have more faith. But then when you realize, oh, it's pretty devastating, like, okay, I gotta figure this out.
Well, and then the other thing too is you talked about like just feeling like you were completely fragmented. And when you said that, I had this picture of Humpty Dumpty on the wall, and then
Mhm.
Humpty Dumpty falls off the wall, and Humpty Dumpty is, in pieces on the ground. And you got to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. That's you got to put yourself back together again after divorce. You actually are going to become a different person though, because you are going to now become a person who is not married to that person. You also have to heal from all of the things that happened. So you went through abuse, you went through emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, financial abuse, and so you had to figure out like how do I become the strong person who trusts herself and who trusts her feelings and trusts her emotions. And then you're married to a narcissist means that you don't have a fully developed self because you had to give so much of yourself to him, to the marriage, and not have a full self because he wouldn't like that if you were strong and very, independent. And so you actually never developed that full, I'm putting words in your mouth. You
Yeah.
can tell me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
but hadn't developed that full self, and now you have to do it aside from the marriage, and there's huge amounts of loss. You talked about grief. Let's talk about the grief. In my classes I do bring up grief, and I like that because I think it's so important to highlight what is the grief process in divorce. So the shock denial was you not recognizing that the marriage was over, that the marriage was super toxic, that you need to get out. So you blew up that shock denial by leaving and getting by being willing to file for a divorce. But then there is another stage in the grieving process is the anger. So sometimes when you get away and you begin to validate and you recognize or you get validation from other people or you begin to validate yourself and you realize, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
I believed this. I believed that. I didn't see this. I didn't see that. Sometimes it's almost like awakening out of a slumber and
Yeah.
again, I think you've talked about how the pieces kind of started, it's like jing, 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 jing. They just all started to fit to where it was clear. Did you feel a lot of anger then at him?
Yeah, then I started getting upset, because I thought, wait a minute, I've just been duped. Like, and then you start kind of doubting yourself, like, oh my gosh, I'm not a good judge of character.
Yes.
And then you start guilting yourself about that. But then, I had a good therapist who said, don't waste a moment of the learning here. This is like fertile soil that
Yes.
you can grow and learn so much. And she said it in a way that it was empowering to me.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this can catapult you into a place if you'll let it, that you may someday turn around and, be grateful for the trial that you went through. And I really have to say, I mean, I know a lot of people may be in a raw spot. You can't see it then,
Yes. No.
but I am starting to see it now.
Yeah.
Now I am starting to really realize that now, that you do become your full self. You
Hmm.
have more of yourself than you ever had before. And
Exactly.
yes, and there is light and there is hope and there's beauty and there's joy that you may not even understand yet
Hmm.
because you've been in such a dark place.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, in a full self that you've never really been because
Hmm.
you were hurting in the marriage, and abuse makes you feel so fragmented anyway.
Hmm.
And it is, you're parts of yourself, and there's parts of yourself you have to disown, parts of yourself, or you have a split where he's telling you one thing but you're wondering if it's something else, or you feel something else but you believe the lie when you're being gaslit and have stuff thrown at you. So yeah, so the anger, and then the did you talk to him at this time, like, about the divorce? Did you have opposing attorneys? Was it a bad fight in terms
Uh,
of, like,
it
financially and
bad fight, but I mean, he's very triggered by financial because he grew up
okay,
very. But we're fine. In fact, it was kind of like it wasn't even in the realm of reality, and
hmm,
I'd order the wrong sandwich and I would prepare him. Hey, I'm going to a restaurant and I'm going to get the high price thing. It's a new
right,
place.
right,
I'm going to get this thing. It's like twice what we normally spend. So why don't you look at the menu and be comfortable with it? That's what I'm going to do. We get there and we were fighting for like 10 minutes in line. Like, you can't get that sandwich. We
hmm,
can't afford it. Like, we really can't afford it. I'm going to get the sandwich. And then I finally just got my own credit card, put it down, got the sandwich, and then sat down. But then it's like he's beside himself. We're with another couple and he can't even be cordial anymore. It's like he's silent. He's so dysregulated. He
because you didn't go along with him telling you what to do.
can't
Yeah.
do that,
And that was towards the end of your
Like,
marriage.
I had broken the finances. What broke us? How did we go bankrupt? It was that sandwich. It's like
Okay.
so intense, but what he's normally used to is for me catering to that and to calm him down, then I have to acquiesce, you
Right.
know.
Now, did you do that before you separated? Did you actually stand up financially and get your own credit card while you
No,
were married? Right
because
after.
no, it was after. It was when we were in
Oh,
that 5-year separation
oh, I
period.
see. Okay.
Finally started putting some boundaries down like that. I saw what it was and it's okay to do that. And so I thought, okay, I've got to learn how to do this, to stand that holy ground. You don't puff up, you don't shrink,
Yeah.
stand that holy ground. If you're right, you're
Okay.
right. It's okay
Yeah.
to move forward, even if
Yeah.
they have a temper tantrum.
Yeah.
So
Detach from the temper tantrum and let them have it and don't own it.
try to
Yeah.
figure it out. But it would take sometimes weeks to move through that one issue for him to
Wow.
clarify, to see that that wasn't okay and that I'm not just being mean. He has an emotion, a bad emotion. I'm looking at you. I'm the cause of it. I'm being mean, or I'm not being fair, or something. It's my fault somehow.
Yep. Yep. And you got to fix it then. You got to change yourself. You got to apologize. You got to make it better. You got to not do that again. Right. Yeah. So you felt the anger
Started
and
feeling angry because I started to see it. I started to see, hey,
and you
and
saw other stuff too. You saw other stuff in the marriage that hadn't made sense, and and that kind of thing. And then the bargaining. How did that show up when you do the if only? Did you have that, or were you
oh,
already
yeah,
kind
because I
of
thought,
that?
wow, what if I learned this stuff before? What if I had taken Carla's classes before? What if I would have learned what a boundary was before? What if I would have been able to, we could have gone together, like uh, truth and telling the truth in love.
Mhm.
What is your course called? That's
Oh, the
relationship or
the
navigating.
Oh, the difficult relation, transforming difficult relationships. And
Yes. Mhm.
yeah,
All those kind of things. But again, I thought, wow, I mean, I worked so hard and there was 27 years of therapy and some of it he came to and some he didn't. And he did in the end go to some alone, but he never could change his focus of consuming what behavior do I need to do to get what I want. The
yeah,
focus never did turn. It didn't vary. And
right.
that was hard reckoning for me to see. People have their free agency. That's a
Yeah,
part of God's law.
absolutely. Right.
You know, they're free to choose and they do
Yeah,
make some bad choices. So his choice was to do that rather than actually doing the work and being humble enough to say, I got to change.
yeah,
I'm going
absolutely.
to try to do something just because, whether you're here or not. And if
Exactly.
I
And
had seen that behavior during that separation period at time, if I would have seen him change and on his own, no
yeah,
matter what, him just become whole. Oh, I would have been back in a second. I would
of
have been so
course.
happy. I never
And
saw.
most women will because they don't want a divorce. They want to keep the marriage. They've invested a lot of time, tried to change, tried to fix him, and then all of a sudden, if he's like getting better, of course you still want the marriage, right? And I mean, there are some whose hearts turn and they're like, I'm done, that's it, and they are closed. That happens also, but there are a lot of women that, yeah, if they change, you're back. So the if onlys are they can be grueling for and that's where you kind of like, if only I had help done more, or if only, and sometimes it's like and they can go on and on and on. But I like for people to understand that the if onlys are a way of trying to get through the grief process. That you have to, it's like you have to check, you've got to look at all the if onlys and kind of counter them, answer them, and say, well, okay, if only he had changed, but he didn't. If only I had tried harder, but I tried really hard. If only God had changed him. Well, God doesn't force people to change. It's like you've got to go through them and settle them once and for all in your mind.
I
So
love what you're saying
you,
there because that helped me so much. What I said, that fact checking my story,
yep.
and I had good friends because I was in a master's program for therapy. And as I would express this
Mhm.
to one really, really close friend, she was always there, was Jaylyn,
Yes.
our mutual friend. Um, she was able to help me do that. And see, I would say that sometimes you are so heavily groomed, and for years, if this has been over a long period of time, please get some help and
Yeah.
trust a friend who cares about both of you.
Yep.
They're not just going to bash. I'm not into husband bashing,
Right.
but truly, you've got to have a fact checker. And sometimes you're not the best at this time. When
Hmm.
you're just coming out of it, you're still
Hmm.
under that influence, okay, of that dance that you have written together.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
So I did need an outside party. I'm going to say this, and I had two good friends that were absolutely great fact checkers, and they would do just what you did. They'd go down the list like, but he didn't. He chose. He made his choices. He
Hmm.
had a chance to do that, and he chose every time not to do it.
Yep.
Then everything I would come up with, if only we would have done this. You went to 27 years of therapy. Do you know anyone else who's done that?
Yep.
You tried as hard as you could.
Yep.
You put full, you know, blood, sweat, and tears into it. So they would tell me the truth.
Yep.
Sometimes my truth, I wouldn't tell myself the truth
No.
because I had been gaslit for so long. I don't know what the truth is anymore.
Right. You need somebody
So,
that's objective. And there
right.
are people, like your family members, probably family's not the best to do that because your families are more reactive toward
Yeah.
protecting you. And they might be something like, let the jerk go, or you should have dumped him a long time ago. And if you have friends that are like that, they're not your fact checkers. They're not the ones that you could trust as fact checkers because you'll have that internal meter that'll say, no matter what I tell them, they're going to say he's a jerk.
Mhm.
You need them at times to know that they'll tell you if you are wrong or if something's going on, and they are kind of telling you, look, you are. I remember one time when I was needing to leave my husband, one of the time that I did file for divorce, I was so like absolutely stuck that I had to have my sister and a good friend drive up to where I lived, and they packed my stuff
Wow.
for me because I was so stuck. And so you got to have people like that where you know that they'll take a stand. But then that's those same people would tell me in at a different time if they thought I was wrong as a mom or as a friend or as a person or even, as a wife. I trusted them.
Valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. So
You don't
that
have
is
friends. I would say a lot of that clarity came through those classes that you offer, which I
yes.
think is just so beautiful. So if you don't have friends, take courses like that
Or
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 get a
if
therapist.
or if you do have friends, you could still take my classes. But yeah, they're all of them are great in no matter what stage of life or difficult relationship you're in, but really helpful with divorce too, because the transforming difficult relationships, I say take that if you're going through a divorce, because you've got to still work with that person and still be able to detach and still be able, there are times that you're still going to be dealing with them, especially if you have children together. And then, the truth in the mirror and the healing the wounds of the past, they go through all of it. But yeah, and then so after the bargaining,
Mhm.
the next stage often, and you go back and forth between these stages. It's not like you go
Right.
through this completely and something else happens, you'll flip and you'll go back, through them again. But then the sadness, and that's what most people think grief is when you feel that just that gut wrenching sadness where your stomach is in knots and you're crying and you feel like life is never
Yes.
going to be okay and you're depressed. That is what people think is grief. That's only one stage of grief. But how did that work with you?
So, boy, I was fortunate to have to be living in a home with that was very supportive. That where I moved, it was with a really good friend and her daughter.
Okay.
Um, and her parents lived down the street and they were very nurturing and loving. It was
Mhm.
such a soft place to fall and to mirror back to me um, just love and the truth, really telling me the truth. Like, let's talk about that. They would let me talk. I could cry openly. So what a gift. That was
Yes, definitely.
a blessing that I had that time and that I could turn that or really turn what I was suffering internally so many times. They would, and I mean, how lucky is this that sometimes my friend Jalen saw that I was distressed and she said, but what's going on? Sit down, let's talk about it. And I would tell her how I was feeling. And then she would reflect the truth. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I was so deep stuck in my sorrow
Yeah,
that I was writing a story that's not true at all.
yeah,
I could not see myself. I
yeah,
couldn't see the truth, so it does take those moments and that process of now seeing what truth really looks like.
yeah.
What makes you whole? What gives you joy? Because
Hmm.
it's like you're in that spot where it's like you can't feel joy anymore. So now, like,
Hmm.
now you made this decision, and like, oh, it just feels devastating. Is there
Yeah,
hope on the other side? Because
you
you
don't
don't feel
know.
it yet.
At that
And
point, you don't know that there's hope. You don't know that it's going to all be okay. You think, am I going to be able? And you were 20 when you got married. So, am I going to be able to take care of myself? Am I going to be able to like live my own life? And am I going to, all of that stuff is all stuff you have to learn.
Mhm. Yeah.
It is better to move out of the house. My friends told me that. You should not get married when you're 20. You should move out of the house and live on your own and know you can do that before you get married. So much better.
Yeah. I had even been gone for a year of college, but still, I was just a baby.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So the sadness, and then when you came out of the sadness, I mean, did you just begin to feel like there was hope? I mean, how did that come about?
Okay, so here's the kicker on that is that it is a process and
Mhm.
there is a cycle, that you may cycle in and out of, and sometimes even now, like I had a meltdown moment maybe last week, and then you do have to ground yourself again and realize that life is hard. And
Mhm.
then you have to ground yourself. Like what I found is that self-care is not optional.
Right.
If you don't do it, you suffer.
Yes.
So as I get busy, I'm in a new place, I've moved, and now I'm in a new job, and self-care starts going by the wayside. If you don't really come up with a good self-care plan and you don't use it, you suffer. And then you can find yourself kind of like, oh no, what am I going to do? How am I going to navigate all this?
Mhm.
But as you go back to it and with a therapist or a good friend or something, if you just come up with a good self-care plan, that it is concrete, you know
Yes.
what works for you.
Yep.
You discover what works for you. For me, one, getting out in nature was just such a big plus. You
Yeah.
know, I have some foothills that I would, you know, do a walk in. So simple, but I would cut it out, you know, when things got
Yeah.
busy. But now I'm understanding, oh, I really can't cut that out. You're not being selfish.
Mm-mm.
You really have to, you've
Mm-hmm.
really got to put that oxygen on yourself,
Yep.
you know, come up with this plan for yourself. So that's, it is kind of how I dug out. In the beginning, I did not want to be a burden on anyone. So, and I felt because in my marriage, I'm punished when I have needs.
Oh,
Me to go to people that I love and really need and say I have a need, I'm going to be a burden to you. Oh my gosh, that was, it was just so, I was so fearful. I almost couldn't do it. And I really had to I just had to press forward and lean in on the support system that was there and
yes.
see that truth. Like, hey, we're not going to leave you. You're needy. We'll let you know. I'll tell you if it's too much. You
And
know,
it's better not to go to your children for this. I mean, there's sometimes you have a really good relationship with an adult child who gets the truth of the marriage and who you can, but it's better to get that outside the support that you need, and you can allow your kids to be there, but you don't want your kids to have to hold you up because
mhm.
they're adult children with their own lives, and you don't want them to feel like you are their responsibility as much as possible. And you also don't want to make them think that your emotional well-being is their responsibility.
Yeah,
So,
that's
if
a
you have,
really that's a really good point.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, my kids, we did, I'll talk about that. And you don't even know you're doing it because now I'm worried because I'm thinking, oh no, now they're going to be gaslit. They're going to be fooled and deceived and used. And,
yep,
he's going to pull the wool over their eyes like they did for me. But their relationship with their dad is not like what it was for me.
mhm.
But you can't tell that sometimes when you're spinning and you're thinking, I
No.
gotta,
Oh, no. No, no, no. Because you feel the automatic thing is to think my children experience exactly the same thing with him as
Mhm.
I do. And in some ways they do, because like you said, your children felt the rigidity and they felt that I'm never right and I'm always doing something wrong and I'm missing the mark and I'm always in trouble and walking on eggshells, but still not the same relationship of a child to a father as it is a wife to a husband. So it is kind of different. They're also adults. They've got to learn how to figure out what their relationship is with him based on who he is and how he interacts with them. But a lot of times a narcissist will turn the children against the spouse.
Yeah,
And
that's what I was afraid was going to happen,
yeah,
and that's devastating because sometimes I've seen it
totally.
happen,
Yep. Yep.
blame the victim,
Hmm.
so that's really, really tough. And
Yep.
my kids did set boundaries with me, which is hard,
Yeah.
because you're really
What were some
scared.
of the boundaries?
Well, they set a boundary that like we're not, we understand you keep on talking about this and you need it, like we understand it and we were there and
Mhm.
we agree with you and we support you. Yeah, but what's going on? Why are you keep talking about it? And
Oh,
I think I'm trying to still believe it myself. Like what just happened? Sometimes
okay.
it's in the face again. Like, what was I really that deceived? Could I just not really see what was going on here? And then I'm worried for my kids. I'm worried for you guys. And then they put a boundary like, we're not going to talk about it really anymore.
Mm,
I
okay.
mean, I do have my support group. I have good friends. I have clergy. I have a good therapist. You know,
Hmm.
I can settle it there. And then for me to see the value of that.
So your kids actually said, I don't want to talk, don't talk to us about it anymore. Yeah.
We're going to set it with him too. And we're not, and they're adults, you
Hmm.
know, we have our lives. And yes, we love you. And so we want to support you, but we're not going to get involved. We don't want to be in
Yeah.
the middle. So we're not going to
Very
talk.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Excellent. So
I
good
have a
for
daughter
you.
who's a therapist, so she probably has tips on
Health,
how.
healthy children,
Yeah, and
healthy
so of
adult
course
children.
you could see how I would want to go to her because she
Yeah.
would know what to do. But
Right.
then she had to set her own boundary with me and like, I can't be your therapist.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I know what to do. I know what my opinion is how I would treat you is, but she can't be my therapist. And that's true.
No,
That's a
absolutely not.
responsibility on her. And
Right.
I'm not her responsibility, you know? And I do. And what the beautiful thing is when you actually do the work here, You come out of a trial, if you will walk with God and do the work,
Yeah.
you come out with skills.
Yes. You
That's
do.
empowering. You
Yes.
become stronger. You actually do become a new person.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
just a beautiful thing about life, that
Yep.
in anything worthwhile, any struggle, whether it's your muscles or learning, neuroscience or whatever you're doing, and relationship wise too, is that there's a tension or work that has to be done. There's a
Yep.
little bit in there.
Yeah. You don't get there without it.
Yeah,
It's,
if you tolerate that, it
exactly.
is worth the reward.
Yeah. And you have to go through the emotions, because if you don't go through the emotions, it's like Christians who think, well, I'm not supposed to be angry, so I can't be angry.
Mhm.
So if you don't allow yourself to be angry, even angry with God, maybe, why didn't you fix it? Why did I stay
Oh,
so long? Why,
yeah.
if you don't allow yourself to feel anger, that you're not correctly processing the grief, and you're stuffing. It's not, you're not walking through all of that. And some people have trouble feeling anger because they never could as a child.
Oh gosh, yeah, me, that is me. Because
Yeah.
we didn't have a lot of anger in my house, there was some, but
Yeah.
it wasn't, I never heard one swear word kind of my parents' mouth. I mean,
Mhm.
like that's a real rare, they were rare individuals. So,
Yes.
and I felt like anger was not allowed. I shouldn't be, it's not godly. And I would get that from my ex as well, is that, oh, you're being angry and you're going off the rails and you can't be upset and just put on a happy face and
Yeah.
fake it
So
till you.
you did allow yourself to be angry during the grief process.
Yeah.
And then
Mhm.
when you go,
That's
after you go
like
through
that.
the sadness, the whole idea of the grief process, if you think about it, starting from shock denial, is, oh my gosh, I have to divorce. I've got to go through this divorce. My marriage is going to be over. That's a shock. It's like, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm going through this. I can't believe the marriage is going to end. I can't believe I'm divorced. I can't believe that my family fell apart. I couldn't fix this marriage. All of those things. That's the
Mhm.
shock denial. On the other end, after you go through the denial, the anger, the bargaining, the sadness, is acceptance. And the acceptance is where you can come out and realize, oh, it is what it is. I had to divorce. I did my best in the marriage. Yeah. Were you perfect? No. Did you have your own set of problems, your personality, your issues that were in the marriage too? Yes. But I explain it like the big issue is the abuse and the narcissism. And then you each have your little stuff of your own.
Yeah. Our
But
little sections. Yeah.
yes, but the marriage could have worked with those things. That's not what blew the marriage up.
Mhm.
So what blew the marriage up was the narcissism and the abuse. And that's different. But going into that acceptance is where you actually find peace, is knowing I couldn't change this. I did the best I could. Yes, I need to be divorced. I'm going to be divorced. I'm going to start a new life. I'm going to be single. I'm going to be responsible just for myself. And do I know I'm going to get married again? How do you deal with that?
Okay, so for that, I feel like, wow, I'm still shell shocked, and I'm not against it,
Right.
but I feel like I'm growing myself. I'm finally myself, and I have a big, beautiful life ahead of me. I have
Hmm.
a career I'm starting in, again, a different career, and a new home, and all these things are kind of stressful too, but I'm excited for the me I get to be
Yeah.
finally.
And you move closer to your children, so you get to be near your
Right.
kids.
Have that
Right.
by all my grandkids. And it's a new life. And to step
Yeah.
into that I can do that with all these, without the boundaries, without feeling the straitjacket, you
Yeah.
know,
Without the
you have
abuse.
so much more brain space if you
Yes.
get to the other side, if you can hold that tension, go through the grieving
Yeah.
and, heal and do the work. And then there's the pot of gold on the other side.
And
There,
imagine you don't have him telling you that you're wrong and it's your fault, and throwing the abuse at you, and like you said, keeping you in that constricted space, and you're not trying to convince somebody to try to love you and try to be better to you, and having all this strain about this dysfunctional relationship that wears on you after a while. when you're constantly trying to figure it out and figure out what's wrong and figure out how it can be better and figure out if you did something wrong, that's like a huge ton of weight just lifted off of you to where you're now like by yourself
Yeah.
and make
Well,
choices.
I called it thinking about like trying to make the marriage work. I remember telling the therapist, it's like, she goes, do you think it'll work? And I go, well, it feels like putting on a 20-ton suit.
Yeah, there you
Like,
go.
wow, if I have to stay in, that's what it feels like.
Hmm.
Really, I wasn't suicidal, but I just felt like, wow, death can't come soon enough. You know, like, wow, this is, I don't know. It's that, I was kind of jealous. That probably shouldn't be a thing if you hear someone pass, like, wow.
Well, it's part of being in a really difficult marriage where you feel stuck and you feel
Mhm,
like you have no options and no hope. And
mhm,
I don't like condemn people or judge people for having that because it's kind of like it's like the bargaining place where you're kind of like, I'm in this difficult marriage. I can't, this is a horrible marriage. I can't imagine staying in this marriage, but I can't get out of this marriage because of the church, because of this. And and then being like, well, what if God changed him? Well, what if God killed him? Like, in the Bible,
and
Abigail's
then you
husband,
guilt
like,
yourself for having any of those thoughts,
yeah.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
but that's again where I am so I love the grief process because it gives people space to be human, and it
Mhm,
gives, which God created us with the ability to feel emotions and the need to feel emotions. And God grieved. He grieved over the choices of Israel. He grieved. He was angry. He was jealous. He was remorseful. He regretted at some time saying, all the things that he had done with them. Even in the time of Noah, he said he regretted creating man.
mm,
Like God has regret, and God has he grieved over all of the sin and the fact that he grieved over the infidelity of Israel turning against him. So God went through the grief process, and we have to. And all of those things. So when you have those thoughts, well, I wish God would just kill him. I mean, I've heard Christians say, oh, that's sinful. You can't, that's Jesus saying, if you even say, the scripture about, raka, if you say raka, if you say like, anything, even if you're even barely angry at your brother, it's the same as murder. And so people condemn themselves like, no, this is part of the grief process of what you have to go through, where you have to recognize, no, I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed to try to figure out a way out of this impossible situation. And that's now, are you going to actually do that? No. But and then acceptance though, when you could, that's that exciting part. And then I've heard just not too long ago that the sixth stage is hope
oh,
after you make through acceptance, where you're like, I am single, I am going to be divorced, I am going to be okay, is that hope? What hope? I have a new life. I'm going to have new choices, new options. Isn't that cool?
mhm, it is really cool. It is really, really cool. I mean, and it's something that at certain points you don't know is even possible.
Mm-mm.
So it is a beautiful part. And what I want your listeners to know if they're going through this is that my experience with when people are feeling hopeless,
Hmm.
I feel like that maybe hope is such a big and overwhelming, out of reach feeling
Concept. Yeah.
concept, right? And that sometimes it's okay for them to realize that you might even have to back up. And just because I know this was true for me, back up and just move towards the thought and consider that hope is possible.
Ah, I like
That
that.
for me, I had to just start believing others who were telling me about hope
Mm,
and telling me what it looked like, who had been through divorce and that they had come out through the other side.
right.
And so for a time, I just had to trust my friends and
Yeah.
consider that, okay, it is possible. Because there are moments that you're just like, I just don't see how it could ever be better. There's the pain of divorce and there's the pain of staying.
Hmm.
Don't see because you don't have any experience with the other side.
Yes, that's it.
If you can just have that faith and trust friends who love you and who
Yeah.
have been through it. And I can't tell you how helpful your courses were. And just listening to the things like what you were talking about, understanding scripture, understanding the nature of God and who gave us these emotions,
Right.
and that all those things are okay.
Yeah.
Now, what you do with them may not always be
Okay. Right.
serve you well, but certainly having those emotions, we were created by God, who had those emotions as well. So,
So I have a question. So people might be watching going, okay, she's on YouTube. She's talking about him. We're not giving your last name. We're not saying what state you live in. Okay, but people could watch it and recognize you. People might be saying, oh, how can you do that? How can you do that? Why are you saying all those things about them?
okay. So really good point. But when you come to this side, and I really do believe that marriage is a beautiful, beautiful gift from God. I really do.
Hmm.
I don't hate men. Don't think men are evil or anything like that. So I really just believe that's a sacred covenant we make and just a beautiful relationship that the Lord intended for us to be able to partake in. And I really feel now that if my experience can help anyone, then I'm willing. And I do believe my ex-partner, if his understanding was clear, that if our story could help somebody, then it is worth telling.
Yes.
Look at the biblical stories. Boy,
Yep.
that's a whole book full of dysfunctional families, right?
Yep.
I
And
believe
laid
that's
out.
why Christ came,
Yep.
is to
Yep.
heal us.
Yep.
I think there's healing for me. I think there's a plan for my ex-husband.
Yep.
And God has a plan for all of us. And
Exactly.
we behavior makes sense. It may
Mhm.
not serve you well, but I believe my ex's behavior made sense for him.
Yeah,
And
it does. And based on his childhood and what he went through, you don't even look, you can still have compassion and
yes.
for
Mhm.
anyone. And that's where I always say there's a reason for behavior and you can have compassion about the reason, but the behavior is still not okay.
Mhm. And
The
the Lord doesn't,
behavior,
forgiveness does not mean putting yourself in harm's way.
no, it does not.
So now I'm at the point where now uh, I can set a real hard boundary. I know that I have to have
Really,
no
none.
communication unless
Because if
just
you do,
because it's twisted and
still,
yeah, it's very twisted and I'm guilted and I, it's been 10 months since the actual divorce period.
okay.
And I think that I still see myself getting pulled into, I have blind spots.
Hmm.
So I have to check with friends when I send correspondence and they can help me see things, instead of being triggered because you have those triggers and it is a process and
Right.
I'm way better than I used to be. But still, when you're triggered, it's not the time to make a decision.
Mm-mm,
You do not
never.
have problem solving, logical brain on board. You're triggered by this big thing that happened to you in the
Right.
past.
And then you're in your lower emotional brain that
Mhm.
doesn't have
Yeah.
reasoning and problem solving.
It's like little
So
PTSD.
he's still, so we talked about him with using scripture
Mhm.
to legalistically, moralistically, to judge you, to tell you you're wrong, to tell you what you need to do, and using that as spiritual abuse and abuse, gaslighting, telling you you're
So
crazy
very
when you
manipulative.
say he still does all that.
Yeah.
If you talk to him,
If
that
we
will.
have to talk about money or things we still own a house together and there's all kinds of things going on that we have to have some correspondence, but he still tries to say, okay, you've got to do this with me and we've got to make these plans. I'm like, no, I'm not going to plan any, I'm not going to calendar, I'm not going to do all these things like we used to. And I've got to put a firm boundary that there's just no communication
Mhm.
um, until I am clear about what the outcome is going to be because I can really get pulled in as a
Wow.
Christian, as a people pleaser still. And as a Christian, thinking that, am I being fair? I want to be fair. I don't
Yeah.
want to lie. I don't want to harm.
Right.
Uh, you know,
you want
but
to give him
I,
kind of a chance. You want to give him, the reason. You want to explain it or understand. So yeah, you're trying to. I have a hard time, and I just heard another woman that's super smart and has like all this stuff, and she's I always take people at face value, and I'm like, so do I, even though I know they can be horrible. I'm
oh,
always looking at them. Somebody could be telling me like I used to do this, I used to do that, and I'd just be like, I'm listening and I'm believing what they say, and I'm interested in what they're saying as a person. And I got my other people I know, they're like automatically like thinking the worst about people. It's like people lie, people are bad, people do this, and I'm like, oh, tell me more.
me too. I know that's my default. It is my default, and there's pros and cons to it, but I did come from such a good place. I don't
Yeah,
expect people to be taking advantage of me.
yeah,
I don't expect people to, not have my best interest, on the in forefront of their minds.
yeah,
So I do that. So I do have to catch myself and
yes. So you got to be so you put a boundary
so those
though.
boundaries, yeah. So I do have to keep those boundaries. And
Mm,
part of it is just knowing yourself. Like, what do I need in place still
yes,
for me
to
to move
take
forward?
care, to be okay. Yeah,
And to set a new pattern. I have a good friend who reminds me, you're setting a new pattern. Remember, you're setting a new pattern that you don't do this anymore. You don't
right,
coordinate with him anymore.
right. Yes, yes. You don't coordinate. You don't
Always
have to
going
make
to be
decisions.
taking, pushing the boundary further out in his
Yeah,
favor. And
yeah,
he can see straight. So you've got to decide, fact check with your good friends first who've
yeah.
been through divorce. They've seen this, they're a little more seasoned,
Hmm.
before you make decisions financially and that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
And just right now, it's just got to be just work related, and that's it. And he'll
So
throw
it
little bombs
comes
in
like a
there.
business, right? It comes like a business. And then a
Yes.
couple of things that I know people really struggle with in divorces is recognizing that you're not going to convince your ex why you needed to leave, what was wrong with the
Oh
marriage,
gosh.
what their problems were. It's
That's a whole process. Yeah, that's a whole
talk
big
about
thing.
that for a minute. How do you like let go of that fantasy that you're going to that your spouse is going to get it and understand all the marriage problems and finally understand you and say, "Oh, Wendy, I know you had to leave me. Like I did all these things. You're not a bad person for leaving me." Like how
Yeah.
do you get there?
Well, I would say that is a process. And, wow. I mean, that is a long process, I'd say, because it's your dream. It's
Yeah.
what you'd hope. And what I had to realize is that do not treat someone else as if they think like you,
Yes.
and have your values and have your operating system and your motives. I've had to really, really remind myself that and have good friends remind, like, okay, remember, he doesn't have your best interest, and he's very jaded when it comes to very triggered when it comes to money. He can't
Mhm.
be fair. What he thinks is fair is very one-sided.
Right.
And he's, smart, articulate, and, has been doing this. His manipulation has been his survival tool. So he's
Exactly. From being a child,
yeah.
from childhood to survive. So, and did he tell you that you were wrong and in sin?
Oh
Did
yeah,
he?
ridiculous. And, you can't do that. That's not like you. And that's not
Right.
right. It's not Christ-like. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you were the bad guy. So then his
Oh,
story
totally.
tells
No,
the
I
one.
can't forgive. That's not a Christ-like quality. You should,
Yeah, right.
you just can't forgive
And that's
it.
using
You're
forgiveness, yeah,
deceived.
manipulatively. You can forgive, but you don't have to reconcile and you don't have to stay with someone. And actually, in my Healing the Wounds of the Past class, I teach that in order to forgive, you do have to go through the grief process. So
Hmm.
going through that grief process is part of forgiveness because
Oh,
you have to grieve the losses that of the and the damage that the person did to you. So in a divorce, you've got to grieve the loss of the divorce and everything, and the fact that you have the loss of the dream, the loss of the ideal marriage, the loss of your hopes, and the loss of the life and the loss of the family together with the family. That's huge. And so that is a loss. So in order to get to that side where you forgive him for doing the things that he did, that or continue to do so that the marriage couldn't be fixed, you gotta grieve.
yeah. Wow. I'm glad you added that part because
Yeah,
that's true.
It's true, and people don't think about it. They're just thinking, okay, I'm going to make a choice to forgive, then I'm going to do it. It's like, no, it's a huge, long process.
I didn't even think about that as being part of it, part
Yeah,
of it. I mean, I knew I was grieving, but I didn't think about that as a component of forgiveness.
yeah. And you can't forgive. You're not going to be in the middle of going through this divorce and forgive during that. You got to grieve the loss of the marriage before you can get to the other side, I think, and forgive him.
Mhm.
You got to be a little distanced from it to where it's not where you're not so close and so entangled.
Because the emotions are so big, yeah, that you're not so entangled still.
Yes, yes, yes. You
That,
gotta be separate. And then that's a whole process too of becoming yourself outside of a marriage.
because
Uh,
you haven't been that. Like I
no,
hadn't been for
never.
40 years. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Who am I?
So then the truth is you lose some of the things that have to do with together. Like you lose the intact family where you can both be together, but you gain some things. You have new things that you couldn't do when you were married that you can now do. And so it's kind of like you lose some things, but you also gain some things, and that's part of that process. But and how did you come to terms with the fact another thing I've seen that really bothers people is how do you let go of not convincing everyone that you were right? Like if you've got friends or his family,
Why is
or
that so powerful?
it
That pull,
is,
that is so
yeah,
huge. It's so
yeah,
strong. And two, I think that like if you feel like you've been on the victimized side, you
hmm
know, I think a lot of it is that abandonment. You feel like everyone's going to abandon you, and you're so raw at that time, and
yeah.
you feel so abandoned. You've been abandoned your whole marriage. You really haven't been taken into
And
consideration.
there's so
And
much loss.
if they twist everyone against you, it feels devastating.
Yeah, and then that's more loss. That's the loss
Yes,
of your
more loss.
friends. It's the loss of your home. It's the loss of your family. It's the loss of his family. If you had people close that are now against you,
Yeah.
it's
You feel
loss.
so needy too, and you think,
Yeah,
I just can't take one more loss.
yeah,
That it is
exactly.
huge. I can't tell you how overwhelming that is. And
Yeah.
one, I was able to do it because my kids sat me down, probably because I have um, two kids who are therapists, and they're able to help you see it.
hmm
Not helping, we really do want to use the tools that work, right? And that's
Sure.
not a tool that is helpful to
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
And you
And
can
you
say,
have to, I think you just have to accept that you can't set the record straight with everyone. It's
yeah,
like I just have to accept that there are some people that are going to be lost in this marriage, and there's some people that aren't going to know the truth, and they're
mhm,
not going to know what happened, and they're not going to tell me, oh, it's okay. And you have to just grieve that and
mhm.
move into acceptance and recognize, I just have to accept that.
Yeah. And if you haven't in a relationship like this, if you haven't grown a solid self,
Oh, yeah.
this is a piece there. This is a weak part that you have to grow some muscles. So
Yep.
it was a process of time,
hmm
and to be able to grow that part of yourself, to be okay with people, maybe getting the wrong idea.
hmm
I
I think you
really
have to,
had to I had to go over that again and just remind myself, just really ground. Am I doing the best I can? Yes, I am.
yep.
Am I trying to be Christ-like? Yes, I am. And then just be good with that. I
Yep.
know I'm good. I'm good with me. And then I have to just move forward.
Yep. Can't
Great.
please everyone, can't fix it. Yep.
Yeah,
And
you can't please everyone.
yep.
And you can't fix it. You want to. You try in the beginning,
Yep.
but boy,
You can't.
it just doesn't work. It really
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah.
And it usually ends up in a lot of frustration and,
Yeah.
oh, God,
And there's
yeah.
still, I mean, so are you around him at family get-togethers? Like, or does he come like to a grandchild's birthday party when you're there, or has that,
We haven't had no, we haven't done that yet.
okay, so you're
I
not,
thought, oh, we can just do it,
are you going to
easy.
be able to?
No, because at one point he asked if we could start dating again.
Oh,
So that was kind of wow, that was a light bulb moment for me realizing that how out of touch he was with what's happening,
mhm.
you know.
Okay. So you're not able to, but there might be a time when you can do that. Is he with
No, I
somebody
think
else?
that is in the future,
Yeah.
but for me right now. And so since we do still have some business to take care of, we're
Mhm.
just doing business right now because it is too tumultuous. It's
Yes.
still too, the controlling and manipulating, all of that is still there.
And that may never change because sometimes it doesn't. When somebody is a narcissist and abusive, they're still doing it. That's how they know how to how to
Right.
manage things, like you said. And then, um, oh, is he dating somebody else?
He did right away and
Mm-hmm. So
was
painful.
planning to get married
Okay.
right away. And then that ended up not working out.
So
And I
how was that? Was that really hard for you, or were
it
you
was hard for
separated
me to
enough?
see how quickly, but I've read about narcissists. I didn't because he was a covert narcissist. I never thought he was a narcissist. I thought he was just a broken
Yeah.
human. But
Right.
true, he's very self-focused. And I thought, oh wow, how they just like toss you aside
Mm,
quickly. Wow.
exactly.
So that was painful, but I always felt like by the end of my marriage, it's like I felt like I could throw him and his new bride a wedding and I would be so disconnected that that's how far it had come. That
Hmm.
we're so emotionally disconnected. For me, I was because I
Yeah.
could
And
nothing.
sometimes you are. Sometimes you're just kind of dead to it. But sometimes you're not. Sometimes that's a really, really painful thing. And one of the stories, as you said, that you tell yourself is they're going to be happy. He's going to be the perfect husband with her. He's going to be
Mhm. Yeah.
the man he never was with me. She's going to get
Yeah,
all
I
that.
groomed him for his next wife. Yeah.
Right. I taught him everything. And that used to
Uh-huh.
make me really mad if I'd think
Yeah, and
about
they're going to be the
like,
fun ones, and I'm going to be working this time, and they're going to take over all my grandkids, and they're I'm
yep,
gonna be
yep,
out. Oh my gosh, that was a big fear.
yeah.
Yes, yes,
And
and
what you have to say is, doesn't matter. It
mhm,
probably isn't going to be that way because he's going to be the same with her as he was with you because he hasn't changed. He's the same person, doesn't have other skills, so probably not. But even if he wasn't able to do that with you. That's what you have to tell yourself. He was not able to be that way with me. It
mhm,
was never going to be with me. I have to accept that. And then
mhm,
you let that go. And eventually with forgiveness, we know that we want to get to the place where we can wish the other person happiness.
mhm,
And it
mhm,
takes a while to get there, but we want to be where it's like, hey, I wish him the best. I hope he does have a happy life,
mhm.
and not because as long as we want him to crash and burn and we feel good about that, that's
Yeah,
part of
yeah,
that. I want him to pay,
I
which is
know.
forgiveness.
I'm sure people you've worked with have had this feeling too, is that like I find myself and some of my friends who have been divorced is when you do see them succeeding and looking like they're so happy,
Yep.
um, you think, wow, you can be a predator like that. And the predator just there's no justice.
Right.
Like, wow, they left
And
me
you get angry.
smoldering, and crumpled and twitching in the dust, and they're there, they're off and they're
Yeah.
just, they're just getting to have, they're just having a great time,
Yeah, and yeah,
that's
and
right.
you got to step back from that, and you just got to
Yeah.
realize
Mhm.
it's none of your business.
None of your business.
It's none of
Right.
your business. You don't know what's really going on because on the outside, you guys looked really good too.
Yeah. Right.
Remember, you
Mhm.
looked really good to everyone. So if he's with somebody or in his life, he's looking really good. You did too. So you don't know what's going on the inside. So you just got to be able to accept that. And I know some people listening are probably saying, well, my spouse did turn my kids against me. That's a pain. That is just a deep, deep, deep
Yeah.
loss and a deep wound. And, so we're not minimizing the importance of that because that's really, really, that is a fear and it is a very painful thing to go.
Reality for some people.
And it is.
I
Yeah.
have a very close friend who that is the case. And oh boy, it's just devastating. It's
Yeah,
so
and then on top of that, you got to figure out how do I not only make a new self without my marriage, how do I make a new self if I've lost a relationship with my child? It is possible, but it's a whole nother element that you have to add into that. So, what advice would you have for women and men going through spiritual abuse and other forms of abuse, but spiritual abuse in their marriages or in their relationships? What advice would you have for them?
Well, I mean, it is so tricky. So the thing that's tricky about it, I think if you're a Christian, is that truly, if you're living with someone who's a believer,
Hmm.
so confusing that I really think that if you can, even though there's maybe those unspoken rules, and I think when you have narcissistic control, when someone's trying to control information and what's going on in their lives, there is an unwritten rule that you can't speak. You can't speak up about it,
Yeah.
that you have to suffer in silence, that's not okay, that it's gossip or whatever we talked about
Yeah.
previously. And so that I just want your listeners to know that it's okay to speak. It's
Yeah.
okay to get help.
Yeah.
You, like I felt in my spiritual moment, is that we matter. You
Yeah.
get to matter.
Yeah.
You can get help.
Yeah. You
So
can't do it without help. Somebody has to validate you in the middle of that massive gaslighting, invalidation, and spiritual abuse, which is hitting you over the head with scriptures and
so
condemning
confusing.
you. Yeah, you got to have help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because manipulation, again, I'll say it again, that manipulation is laced with truth. So after over the years, especially if this has been a longer term relationship, you can't decipher that anymore.
No.
Like what's true, what's not true, because there is truth there.
Yeah.
Oh, and if you're a person who really wants to take accountability and show up and really change, then
Yep.
you're looking at the truth part and going, am I,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I better work on
if
that.
all he says, I'm just doing the same
Yeah.
things he's doing, am I? You
Yeah.
know? So yeah,
Very
I think
much.
you need to have clarity. You really need some help.
Yeah.
Whether it's taking your classes or through somebody who's counseling through your church,
Hmm.
or good friends that you really, really trust who will tell you the truth.
Yeah. Or a therapist,
Yeah.
professional help. So, and then
I
what
really
advice do you
recommend
have?
it.
Yeah. What advice do you have for men and women that are going through a divorce or contemplating divorce to give them hope?
Well, just that hope is possible. And I think we did talk about this before, is that
Yeah.
sometimes you're just really there lying in the ashes. You don't know there's going to be a phoenix that can rise from the ashes.
Hmm.
That is not your experience. And you've been trying for so long that that is not your reality. And so if you're there in that place, you really the first step might be just considering that hope is possible. How
Yeah.
do you want to feel? How do you just consider that? What would you like to feel?
Yeah.
And move towards that.
Yeah.
And then move towards maybe friends who have been through it and can talk about the light that's on the other side. And we're not talking about the grass is always green on the other side of divorce. No, I
No.
have problems. Life is still going on. I have kids in trouble and, problems happening here and there. And, but it is way different. You do not have that 20-ton suit on.
Right.
So it's not that you're just problemless once you get a divorce. Yes, you have the regular problems,
Hmm.
different. And you haven't experienced that yet.
Right.
Know that there's life without a 20-ton suit and this grief and the devastation that you're living in. So I just want them to consider that there is hope out there and that it really is real.
Yeah.
And it may seem impossible, but do talk to those people. Again, stay close, use your resources. It's
Right.
important to use that then.
Yes. And there are all kinds of resources. There's
Possible.
church. I mean, there's a divorce care through churches. 12-step programs are a wonderful place to get a support group, is to go to a 12-step group, because those
Oh,
people are there to support you, not just through the issue that is the 12-step group, that whether it's the families of alcoholics or drug addicts or alcoholics or drug addicts themselves, but
mhm.
they help you through all of your life struggles. So there's Celebrate Recovery in churches. I mean, there's all kinds of places that people can go find others that are like-minded, that will be willing to talk about truth and what they're really going through.
And what I've noticed too is sometimes people feel like they're too depressed. They don't want
Yes.
to go on. They
Yeah.
want
No,
to, but there are
not
some
nobody else.
online. Like you've got your courses online. And I've had,
Exactly.
when I was facilitating some of your groups, there were people who sometimes they would have the camera off because they just felt too embarrassed and
Hmm.
too shame and too devastated to
Hmm.
even have their camera on. But then as they started to feel like it was a safe place, then they were able to show themselves and feel the support and start coming out,
Right.
that realize that it is a process. And
Yes.
really I love visuals, and there is something about experiential therapy, they even call it. I
Okay.
love to do this with youth. And so I'm going to leave you with this, just a little object lesson. So my friends crack up every time I use it because I use it all the time because it's so
Okay.
fun.
I'd love to have it.
And based on the scripture here, Matthew 11:28-30, is
Mm.
that um, Christ says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly of heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And I would like to twist that light to also have you consider that light is more than just weight. It might be illumination.
Mm.
And I
Very
have to say that what I have learned and what I'm able to see has empowered me as I've walked on this path. I went from what felt impossible to finding that there is a way, that things are figure outable. And I'll use this little object lesson here is that when you feel like things are impossible, can you see this little piece of paper here? It's
okay.
like it's like trying to come up against a wall and you just can't get through it, right? It's like your task is you have to cut a hole in this piece of paper big enough for you to walk through. Well, I've tried that. Let's try it. You can, have people try that. It's just impossible. I can't get through that hole. But is it really? Is it really? You know how we talk about with God, all things are possible. Well, if you take this piece of paper and you cut it in a certain way, you're going to find that it actually is possible to walk through. And I think this is kind of fun. Families can use this with their kids or whatever at home, is that when we don't see a way, the Lord knows a way. And there's a plan and there's hope, even when we don't see it. And I did not always know how to do this until my father, and see the metaphors, my father showed me how to do this with the paper. And I would say, if my father can teach me this, what about our Heavenly Father?
Yeah.
How much?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm not going to take all the time to do that, but here's another one. But I have changed that shape. It's still the same piece of paper, but now this, if you can see that,
Wow.
this is big enough, the same piece of paper that looked impossible.
You can actually,
It's big enough for me to walk through.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And if I can do that, what can God do for you and with you? That
Yeah.
just because you don't see the way right now doesn't mean there isn't a way.
Right.
That is the same piece of paper. Like, we're the same human being who feels destroyed.
Yeah.
There is a way out. And the illumination that we're talking about here, the light,
Mm-hmm.
and as you learn and grow, you will find a way. You'll be able to walk through that door.
There is hope.
There is hope. There really is. And sometimes if you just have to trust my words, I have to testify that is true. That's been my experience, and not just for me.
But
It's
for
been,
many others.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you. I feel like this whole discussion we had is going to be super hopeful to people.
I hope.
And I'm I know that it will be. So thank you, Wendy, for being honest, for being transparent, for just being vulnerable and sharing the truth of what your journey has been. You've given some really good nuggets in there that people I think are going to hang on to. And I know that this is going to be really helpful. Looking forward to how this podcast is going to. I know both of us are, I'm a therapist, you're a therapist. We both desperately want to help people. So our hope with this is that it would really give people a lot of hope that there is a way through the awfulness of divorce and through a spiritually abusive relationship. So thank you for being here.
Thanks. My
And
pleasure.
thank you for listening and for watching and for sharing this podcast and others with friends and people that would really benefit from it. And I hope that we will have you come back and watch some more. So God bless you.